Well, hello. We're in the tent here. It's about to rain. I wanted to just say something a little bit here. I have these bags in my tent here, filled with books. Put them all into a special arrangement, each of these bags of books. I have here a very special bag I want to share with you, especially on this evening, which is so momentous. 1, 2, 3, 4 books in here. There's some papers too. But what's important is 2 of the books in here. I'm only going to share 2 of them right now. It just so happens they're both pretty much on the same topic, but they're written a substantial amount of time apart. The first one was written in 2019, but before I acquired that one, I found another one written in 1961. The first book I found in sequence was called An Informal History of Texas by Mr. Tolbert. Frank X. Tolbert. The second book I found is another book, Sam Houston and the Alamo Avengers, written by Mr. Brian Kilmeade. Now, I found this second one here on May 5th. The first one I acquired on April 7th, 2022. In this book, the first one, I found some very interesting things. Specifically, I found out that I found this book the day before a very important anniversary in the history of Texas. I wanted to show you something, see if you can see it. There's some pictures in here. See, when I was at that shelter in Pasadena, there was a book in there about the history of the Alamo. But unfortunately, based upon some information that came later, I was concerned that some of the timelines had gotten mixed up. Among the things it said is that during and after the Battle of the Alamo, there was one survivor, a woman, and her baby. The woman and her baby ended up being able to leave the Alamo, and they ended up finding the Texas revolutionaries. And at the time, what they did is they listened to her story about what happened in the Alamo. She told them about Santa Anna. She told them all about the things that happened. They apparently were so roused that it gave them the spirit they needed to continue on and be successful, despite the fact that hitherto they had been a bit downtrodden. They had been a bit in a bad way, so to speak. But there's this story in here about her that's not quite the same as the story I read then. Mind you, that was in a children's book. But this one talks about her and how, in the course of what she did, there was a situation after the Alamo where Miss Susanna, as her name was, ended up being put into a mighty intense situation. It talks about how she went through some period of time where she got a little depressed, or rather, she ended up getting rowdy. She ended up falling in with a crowd and becoming kind of a little bit rowdy. And in the course of that, she ended up getting married and settling down. But what happened is after the war, when they were apportioning land claims to people who had fought and survived the war, they continued to try to advocate on her behalf in order to assure that her land claim was assured, to make sure she got her own land claim. And despite a protracted effort, including a number of people that advocated on her behalf, Miss Susanna never got her own land claim. Now, don't mix up Miss Susanna with the Yellow Rose of Texas. Both of these books have stories about the Yellow Rose of Texas. but they're very different. The pictures in here say one thing about the history of Texas, including the history of Sam Houston and his son Temple. The pictures in the other book, written more recently, give a very different opinion of Texas, specifically insofar as it regards the relationship between Sam Houston and Thomas Jefferson. It would seem that in the 60s, they had a different understanding of just what kind of relationship the first president of the Republic of Texas had, with who was one of the first presidents of the United States of America. But what's particularly interesting to me is that Miss Susanna was never able to establish and maintain her own land claim. And now, I gotta tell you, it speaks something about what we're dealing with right now, not just in Texas, but elsewhere. Today I found substantial information about what they call the Daughters of the Republic and their relationship to the Alamo. Would not Miss Susanna be considered a daughter of the Republic? How many of the daughters of the Republic ended up getting their own land claim? Miss Susanna did not. This right here, this chapter here. Susanna, heroine of the Alamo Siege. And yet in this chapter it talks about Miss Susanna, what she dealt with, kind of things that happened to her. But they also discuss she never got her claim. Why is that? They talk about her baby. They talk about right here the minister's encounter with her, her faith, even though she had a period of lapsing. And then they talk about her final marriage. But they also talk about this: the land, sufficient to entitle the administrator to land. And yet, even though there were these advocates for her, the Republic of Texas did not grant her her land claim. It's a long time. You know, Texas has these rights. They don't really explain them to you. My understanding is, constitutionally speaking, there is no religious test in order to access the public trust, which is about more than welfare or public benefits. Would one consider a Masonic rite to be religious? A religious organization? Would they consider it to be a sect, including a sect that might be preferred when it came to determinations about claims or disputes, including one that may be unconstitutionally privileged? See, insofar as they have these rights, sometimes they bring up old claims that have been unresolved. I contend Miss Susanna's claim is still unresolved. It has a very, very significant impact on the women of Texas. Under the Constitution, Section 26 of the Constitution says you cannot do that. You cannot refuse to allow a woman her inheritance. You also cannot deny her what is rightfully hers just because she's a woman. Yet I contend that's exactly what they did to Miss Susanna. And not only that, they like to play these games where they try to mix and match their concept of a heroine. The Siege of the Alamo is frequently, recurrently a part of both the conscious and unconscious experience here in Texas. Sometimes through ceremonial pageants, sometimes on another level. They like to invite you to learn about the history of this state based upon the history of the Alamo. I contend Susanna's due her land, and so are her progeny. She had children. My understanding, she had more than just a babe at the Alamo. What happened to her children? Where are they? Just saying, this is heavy on my mind right now. How many women, how many daughters of the Republic got their own land claim? See, I've said this, and I'll have to say this again. If Daddy feels entitled to claim what is actually due his daughter, then he's going to have to bear responsibility. It's very simple. If you keep your little girls, even after they get married, and something goes wrong in her name, it falls on your head. It would behoove you to reconsider your relationship with your women.